When Tom Jenkins was ordered to tear down his patio, he uncovered a corrupt scheme led by zoning board head Harold Grayson. With journalist Lisa Nguyen's help, Tom fought back and exposed the truth. You won't believe how this battle for justice ends. Tom Jenkins, a 52-year-old retired firefighter, stood on his back patio, feeling the crisp morning air and the warmth of a freshly brewed coffee cup in his hand. His gaze swept over the modest yet beautiful space he had poured his heart into, a project completed just a few months ago. The patio wasn't just a stretch of concrete and pavers, it was his sanctuary. It was where his grandchildren played tag, laughing as they darted between potted plants Amy, his wife of 30 years, had lovingly tended. It was where summer evenings were spent grilling ribs that neighbors swore were the best in the state. It wasn't just a patio, it was home. And then, like a punch to the gut, the mail arrived. Among the bills and coupons was a letter stamped in glaring red ink. Tom frowned, peeling the envelope open. As his eyes scanned the words, "Violation notice, immediate demolition required," his heart sank. His calloused fingers trembled slightly as he read it again, disbelief washing over him. The zoning board claimed his patio was in violation of setback regulations and demanded it be torn down. "What the hell?" he muttered, the words escaping before he could stop them. His voice carried more confusion than anger, but Amy, drawn by his tone, rushed over to his side. "Tom, what is it?" she asked, concern already etched across her face. She leaned in, her eyes darting over the letter. When she reached the demand for demolition, her hand flew to her mouth. "But we checked everything. We followed every rule." Tom nodded, a bitter taste rising in his throat. He remembered the painstaking process of obtaining the permit, hours spent navigating city bureaucracy, ensuring every I was dotted, every T crossed. The patio had been his retirement gift to himself, something he had done by the book. He grabbed the phone, dialing the zoning board's number with determined precision. After several minutes of being shuffled between automated messages and indifferent clerks, he finally reached a representative, but the response was cold and clinical. "Either you tear it down, or we'll do it for you and send you the bill." For a moment, Tom was too stunned to reply. The audacity, the injustice. It was suffocating. Amy placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, but her expression mirrored his own mix of shock and anger. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, though his frustration simmered beneath the surface. "This can't be right. We have a permit. I'll find it and I'll prove it." The representative sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Sir, you can take it up with the board if you want, but the notice stands. Have a good day." The line went dead. Tom lowered the phone, his knuckles white as he gripped it. "This isn't over," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He turned to Amy, determination hardening his features. "I'm not letting them take this away from us." Amy nodded, her faith in him unwavering. "We'll figure it out. You've faced tougher battles, Tom." Her words gave him a flicker of hope, but as he stood on the patio that evening, the weight of the letter pressed heavily on him. The space felt different now, its peace stolen by a bureaucratic threat. Little did he know, the battle ahead would test him in ways he never imagined, and this was just the beginning. Tom Jenkins didn't waste a second. Determined to get to the bottom of the zoning board's sudden hostility, he began knocking on doors in his neighborhood. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke, and leaves crunched beneath his boots as he moved from house to house. Each conversation revealed more of the same unsettling story: violations issued without explanation, families threatened with fines, and whispers of fees quietly paid to make the problems disappear. "I got one of those notices last year," confessed Mrs. Turner, a widowed retiree who lived 2 doors down. She wrung her hands nervously, glancing toward the street as if expecting someone to overhear. "They said my fence was too high. I didn't have the strength to fight them, so I paid what they asked. It was either that or risk losing my garden." Tom's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about his patio, it was a pattern. One neighbor after another shared similar experiences, and a chilling realization began to take shape. The zoning board wasn't enforcing regulations. They were using them as a weapon to intimidate homeowners and line their pockets. Back at his kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of old paperwork, Tom felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He sifted through permits, emails, and receipts until, finally, he found what he was looking for: the original permit for his patio. The document was clear as day, with an official seal and an explicit approval of the patio's location and design. Relief mixed with indignation. He wasn't just fighting for himself now, he was fighting for everyone who had been bullied into submission. With the permit in hand, Tom marched into the zoning board's office the next morning. The sterile environment, with its fluorescent lighting and faint smell of coffee, felt more oppressive than ever. A clerk with a smug expression barely glanced at the document before dismissing it with a wave of her hand. "This is invalid," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You need to comply with the new regulations." "What new regulations?" Tom demanded, his voice firm but controlled. The clerk shrugged, her indifference like a slap in the face. "You'll have to take it up with the board," she said, turning her attention back to her computer. The conversation was over, and Tom left the office seething. The audacity, the arrogance, it was almost unbearable. Back home, Tom shared the news with Amy, who listened with a mix of disbelief and fury. "They're not going to make this easy for you," she said, her voice laced with worry. "What are you going to do?" Tom didn't hesitate. "I'm going to make it very hard for them." He reached out to Lisa Nguyen, a local journalist known for exposing corruption. Her reputation for fearlessly uncovering the truth made her the perfect ally. When he explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "This isn't just your fight," Lisa said, her voice resolute. "This is bigger than one patio." Meanwhile, word spread among the neighbors. People began showing up at Tom's house, sharing their stories and pledging their support. "They're bullying all of us," said Mr. Peterson, a retired schoolteacher. "If anyone can take them down, it's you, Tom." The weight of their faith was both a burden and a source of strength. As Tom stood in his backyard that evening, the sun casting long shadows over his patio, he felt the first flicker of hope. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was a battle for his entire community, and he wasn't going to back down. When Lisa Nguyen arrived at Tom's modest home, her sharp eyes scanned the piles of documents spread across the dining table. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee, but the tension in the room was palpable. Lisa, a rising star in investigative journalism, had seen her fair share of corruption, but even she wasn't prepared for what they uncovered. As Tom recounted his battle with the zoning board, Lisa took meticulous notes. She asked pointed questions, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad. "This isn't just about your patio, Tom," she finally said, her voice tinged with certainty. "Something much bigger is going on here." Lisa's instincts proved right. Hours turned into days as she pored over public records, cross-referencing property transactions and zoning approvals. What she found was a trail of questionable decisions. At the center of it all was Harold Grayson, the zoning board's chairman. Under his leadership, permits for lucrative commercial developments were greenlit with lightning speed, while residential properties like Tom's faced a barrage of violations. Lisa leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the edge of the table. "It's about money," she declared. "Grayson's tied to a real estate firm that's buying up undervalued properties. They're targeting homeowners like you, pressuring them to sell, and flipping the land for profit." Tom's hands clenched into fists. The injustice of it all was infuriating. "So they're using these fake violations to scare people into selling?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with anger. Lisa nodded. "Exactly. And it gets worse. These so-called new regulations they're citing, they were never properly enacted. It's a bluff." Fueled by a growing sense of purpose, Tom and Lisa joined forces. They combed through emails, minutes from board meetings, and archived documents. One by one, pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Among the most damning evidence was a series of internal emails in which Grayson explicitly instructed inspectors to find violations on specific properties. There was even a draft memo detailing plans to push families out of the area to make way for new developments. Tom felt a mix of disgust and determination as he reviewed the documents. "They're not just bending the rules, they're breaking them," he said, "and they think no one will call them out." Lisa smirked. "They haven't met us." With their evidence in hand, Tom filed a formal complaint against the zoning board. He also hired an attorney to ensure the case had the legal backing it needed. News of the complaint spread quickly, and neighbors began to rally around Tom. The stage was set for a showdown. As Tom watched the community come together, he felt something he hadn't in weeks: hope. "They thought they could scare us into silence," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "But they underestimated the power of a united neighborhood." In that moment, the battle stopped feeling like his alone. It was a fight for justice, not just for his family, but for every family the board had tried to intimidate. And with Lisa's help, Tom was ready to take it all the way. The courtroom was packed to the brim, buzzing with tension as neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers gathered to witness the case that had shaken their quiet community. The smell of polished wood and faint traces of paper filled the air, but it was the weight of anticipation that hung the heaviest. Tom sat at the plaintiff's table, his expression calm but determined. Beside him, his attorney shuffled through a thick binder of evidence, ready to dismantle the zoning board's web of deceit. Across the aisle sat Harold Grayson, the board's chairman, his normally confident demeanor replaced with a pale, nervous countenance. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the crowd behind him. The murmurs grew louder as the judge entered the room, her gavel striking with authority to call for order. Tom's attorney began with a clear, confident opening statement, laying out the case against the zoning board. "This is not a matter of simple regulations," he declared. "This is a case of abuse of power, manipulation, and a deliberate attempt to strip honest homeowners of their rights." The first piece of evidence was the original permit for Tom's patio, projected onto a large screen for everyone to see. This permit, the attorney emphasized, was issued by the city and explicitly approved the construction of Mr. Jenkins's patio. Yet, the board claims it is invalid based on new regulations that, as we will show, were never properly enacted. The defense scrambled to counter, arguing that regardless of past permits, the patio still violated the supposed new rules. But their argument began to crumble when Lisa Nguyen took the stand. Her testimony was nothing short of explosive. Lisa described her investigation in detail, her voice steady and unwavering. She explained how Grayson had leveraged his position to target specific properties, issuing violations that coerced families into paying hefty fees or selling their homes under pressure. As she spoke, a series of leaked emails was projected onto the screen, each one more damning than the last. The crowd murmured in disbelief as messages revealed Grayson's direct orders to inspectors to find something on properties marked for acquisition. The atmosphere grew even more charged when Lisa presented the financial records, linking Grayson to a real estate firm. The documents showed clear payments tied to properties he had targeted, painting an undeniable picture of corruption. Gasps echoed through the room, and even the judge's usually stoic expression flickered with disapproval. Grayson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face growing paler with each passing moment. The defense tried to regain control, but it was clear the momentum had shifted entirely in Tom's favor. The final blow came when several of Tom's neighbors testified, recounting their experiences of harassment and intimidation by the board. Their words were heartfelt and powerful, leaving no doubt about the impact of the board's actions on the community. The judge leaned forward, her expression firm as she delivered her ruling. "It is clear to this court that the actions of the zoning board, under Mr. Grayson's leadership, have been egregious and unlawful. I am issuing an immediate injunction against all pending demolition orders and calling for a full investigation into the board's practices." Cheers erupted in the courtroom, and for the first time in weeks, Tom felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. Justice had been served, and the community stood united. Grayson, now visibly shaken, was escorted out of the courtroom under the watchful eyes of a crowd that had finally found their voice. As Tom walked out of the courthouse, surrounded by neighbors and supporters, he looked up at the sky. The fight had been long and grueling, but it had been worth every second. This wasn't just about a patio anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the odds. The gavel's final strike echoed through the courtroom, but its impact rippled far beyond those four walls. The judge's ruling was clear and decisive. The zoning board was to halt all demolition orders until a full investigation was completed. Harold Grayson, the once untouchable chairman, resigned in disgrace within hours of the verdict, and whispers of criminal charges began to circulate. It was a turning point, not just for Tom Jenkins, but for an entire community that had been silenced for too long. News of the decision spread like wildfire. Local headlines declared, "Zoning board scandal exposed, justice served." Tom's name became synonymous with resilience, and his story inspired others to stand up against similar abuses. Families from neighboring towns began sharing their own battles, finding courage in the example he had set. But for Tom, the victory wasn't about recognition or fame. It was about protecting his home and proving that no one, no matter how powerful, is above accountability. His patio remained untouched, a tangible reminder of what could be achieved through determination and unity. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, the neighbors came together to celebrate, turning the Jenkins backyard into the heart of the community. The scent of grilled burgers and freshly baked pies filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Children darted between tables, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the neighborhood just weeks earlier. Tom stood at the grill, flipping burgers with practiced ease, his heart lighter than it had been in months. Amy approached, handing him a fresh plate. "You did it, Tom," she said softly, her smile full of pride. "You stood your ground, and look what it's brought us." He glanced around, taking in the faces of friends and neighbors who had rallied behind him when it mattered most. "It wasn't just me," he replied, his voice steady. "It was all of us. They tried to divide us, but we showed them what a united community can do." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything in warm hues of gold and orange, Tom took a moment to reflect. This wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the beginning of something bigger. The patio he had built with his own hands wasn't just a place for his family anymore. It had become a symbol of standing tall against adversity. With a contented smile, he called out, "All right, everyone, who's ready for seconds?" Cheers erupted, and the evening stretched on in a celebration of resilience, justice, and the power of coming together. For Tom, the fight had been worth every sleepless night and moment of doubt. He had proven that even the smallest voices could make a difference, and as he stood on his patio, surrounded by the warmth of his community, he knew one thing for sure. Standing up for what's right can change everything.